What's up, guys? Today we're going to be talking about 3 questions to ask yourself before making any kind of decision. And I'm going to walk you basically through the 3 things that I always ask myself before, whenever I reach kind of a decision that I'm not really sure about, or whether I should proceed with it or should I go a different direction with it. So, the first question I ask myself is, will God approve of this? If God won't approve of this, if God doesn't represent this, or if this doesn't represent God, then I shouldn't go forward with this because it doesn't reflect what I believe in. It's not going to make the world better for myself or for the others around me, and it doesn't reflect His mission. So I'm not gonna make that decision, or it does reflect it, and therefore, so far we qualify because that's the first place we start. We always start with the man upstairs. Once we get to His approval, okay, what's the next question? So the next question we talk about is, for me, will my wife and slash family approve of this? So if you have kids, you could say, will this be you could actually extend this into a second question, like 2A and 2B. So for me, I don't have kids, or at least I don't have kids yet. So for me, it's just like, would my wife approve of this? And is this going to help my marriage? Whatever I'm thinking about doing, is this going to help my marriage? Is this going to promote a healthy relationship with my wife? Is this going to make my life better with her? And if it does, then yes, then we can proceed with that. So, and if it doesn't, so I've been a less than stellar husband at some points in my marriage with my wife. So, and that was at the point where I wasn't asking myself these 3 questions. So this is how this question started to come into my life. It's obviously starting with God, and then this question, and then the third one, which we'll get into. But when having your spouse's approval is critical to making any kind of decision, because they are your checks and balances system. And when you ignore your checks and balances system, it throws things out of whack. So so let's just start with this. Let's talk about the second part of that question is, if you have kids, you extend this question from 2A would be, will your wife or your husband approve? And the second question would be, does this set a good example for my kids? Now, I don't have kids yet, like I said, but if you do have kids, this is another question you could extend this to, because I know this was a question that my dad always used to ask himself, would be like, hey, will this set a good example for my sons? And, if it didn't do a good example, he wouldn't do it. And so this is, like I said, this is like 2B. Question 2B would be, does this set a good example for my kids? So does God approve? Does my wife approve? Or does my wife approve / does this set a good example for my kids? And the question number 3 is this something I'd be proud of to have my name associated with? And if it doesn't have that, if you don't answer that, here's the thing: you need to answer all 3 of these with a yes. And if all 3 of these aren't yes, then you don't do it. So this is your checks and balances system. So if you're not proud to have your own name associated with it, if you're not going to stand behind whatever it is you decide to do, or you're embarrassed by it, or you're ashamed by it, or you get that bad gut feeling by being associated with whatever it is that you're trying to be, you're wrestling with a decision over. If you're not getting a good gut feeling, and that's usually an indicator that it's not good, because things that you should be doing or things that feel good to do, they don't give you a bad gut feeling. So, like I said, so start with the man upstairs. That's priority number 1. Now, this is, I'm a Catholic guy, so that's where my higher power is. If you have everybody has their own higher power, so you just, resort to your higher power first. Make sure your spouse and family, make sure you set a good example for your children, and then make sure you have your wife or husband's approval. And then make sure you're proud to have your name associated with it. So, like I said, get all 3 of these things. As long as they have a yes to all 3, you can move forward with it. If it doesn't, then we don't move forward with it. Because at some points in my life, I've been, like I said, less than stellar in performance. I didn't ask any of these 3 things at all. I was totally cut off from God entirely. So there was no connection at all. So there was that any kind of spiritual guidance was lost entirely, just totally non-existent. So you can imagine all of the things I got myself into. That was a lot of trouble that I got myself into, that didn't promote my own well-being, let alone anyone else's well-being. And then when it came to, whether my wife approved of anything, it was just like, I resorted to my natural entrepreneurial tendencies of no one controls the boss of, no one's the boss of me. I just I go out and do whatever I want. I'm Steve Zogany. Nobody controls me. Now, of course I have that level of freedom to do that, but then there's, I guess for lack of a better word, there's abuse of power. And, when you don't have that checks and balances system with your spouse, then you lose that checks and balances and you get out of balance. And then the last question of, am I proud to have my name associated with it? I didn't even bother to ask. It was like, to me, it didn't matter. It was like, well, I'm doing what I want to do. And what's that meme out there in the world? I'm going to do me. So I'm just doing me right now. And regardless of any kind of reaction. So that's what really stunk, and made it, not a good thing for me. So, the consequences of not asking yourself these questions they can be catastrophic, and you can really mess up your life big time. So, I was going down a very dark path at that point in my life when I learned these 3 questions, and then my life has since gone complete 180 when I learned these 3 questions, and they are awesome questions to ask yourself, and they're not hard to remember either. So like, okay, God, wife, and myself, and then do I get all approval on them? If not, then if I don't get 3 yeses, then cool. That's like, then we're not doing it. Easy enough. It's that easy. So I hope you guys did get some good value out of that, and stay tuned for the next episode. See you next time.